I don't know about you, but I've been hearing a ton of negative things about Airbnb recently, kind of like what this YouTuber says.
I don't want to act like an expert on real estate or on this topic, but logically, this all makes sense. Welcome back to the comments section. I'm Bret Cooper. We're going to be talking about Airbnb today, and I have become very passionate about this subject. I am now boycotting Airbnb, not for any political reasons. It just irks me. Everything that they're doing, everything that the hosts are doing irks me.
All right, Bret Cooper, with your fancy eyebrows and your big personality. Admittedly, I like to watch your content, but my daughter really loves to watch your content. So good for you for a lot of the videos that you put out there. However, I have to push back on this specific video. There are things about Airbnb that are fantastic. And in this video, I'm going to show you why Airbnb, VRBO, and other platforms do a great job on meeting a specific need in the marketplace. My name is Shiloh Lundahl, and you are watching the Improved channel focused on real estate investing.
Airbnb now has so many problems that I don't know if they will ever be able to recover. We are seeing the crash of Airbnb. Now, some of these problems include the insane fees that add up to more than the cost per night and the negative effect that it is having on the current housing crisis. There's even horror stories of tenants moving in and then staying and squatting and refusing to pay rent, refusing to leave the property, and Airbnb and the government is doing nothing. So Airbnb is truly a mess.
So to address Bret's first concern, which are the high fees that Airbnb charges, let me address this concern from one of my own Airbnbs in Lakeside, Arizona. So I guess the first thing that I'd like to address is the fees from Airbnb and the cleaning fees. So this cabin is 7 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and it has 2 living rooms and 2 dining rooms. So with it being 3,500 square feet, how long would you suppose it takes to clean this entire cabin? Correct. It takes about 6 hours for 2 to 3 people to clean this entire cabin. And that includes doing all of the laundry and switching out 19 beds.
Somehow, over the past few years, Airbnb has raised their fees higher and higher, almost to a laughable level, to the point that now hotels are more affordable, and social media is very much aware of this.
So now let's talk about the fees. First, there's the fee that Airbnb charges. Now that fee is about 14% to guests, and that's just the fee that they charge that creates their revenue. That's the same revenue that they use in order to pay all of the support staff. So if you have a problem, you call up Airbnb and you let them know, hey, this is a problem, and they'll help you see if they can get it resolved. The same for hosts. If I have somebody that comes into one of my short-term rentals and is a problem, I like to be able to communicate with Airbnb about any issues that I may have with a guest that comes that booked through their site. And Airbnb offers an insurance policy, so if they come in and they do break things, then Airbnb can help resolve that issue with that guest, sometimes even paying for the item that the guest may have broken or stolen. So you're not really going to get away from that 14%. That's the amount that Airbnb charges in order to make its money. But now let's talk about the cleaning fees. In your video, you were really upset that these cleaning fees are so high. In fact, sometimes the cleaning fee is even higher than the nightly rate to stay in the property.
One guy said, agree, the cleaning fees being more than one night stay is insane. And what is sad is that this is not even an exaggeration in the slightest. If you look it up, there are hundreds of examples listed online of these fees exceeding the actual price of the place. Wall Street Silver posted this and said, Clown World, does Airbnb even make sense anymore? I have not used it in about 2 years, but I don't remember it being this bad. Is this for real and typical, or just a really extreme example? And then he posted the screenshot. Only Airbnb can turn $185 a night stay into a $450 per night stay, because there you have the room rate, and then the special night offer, the $225 cleaning fee, and then the Airbnb service fee, $52. That is excluding what they then take from the Airbnb host and then taxes. Like, how does any of this make sense in the slightest?
Hey, look, I get it. In fact, my cleaning fee is higher than the nightly rate to stay in some of my properties. The big issue with this is that he stayed one night. And if you are going to stay one night at an Airbnb, it's going to be much more expensive than if you were to stay one night at a hotel. And why is that? Because usually the Airbnb is much bigger and there's a lot more to clean than when you stay in just one bedroom at a hotel. So this is not comparing apples to apples. If you have one room with one bed versus an entire house, it's going to be different. And the cleaning fee is going to be much higher in a house than in a hotel room. So I would say if you're going to go travel and you're going to stay at one place for one night, then get a hotel. But if you're going to go and you're going to stay there for several days, you want a place to cook, you want to have multiple people there with you, then sometimes an Airbnb is going to be much better than a hotel room would be in terms of being comfortable and having enough space in order to house your entire group. Like I showed you with one of the cabins that I have in Lakeside, Arizona, that property is 3,500 square feet. It has 7 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and 19 beds. It sleeps up to 25 people. So when you have multiple families gathering together for some sort of reunion or birthday or whatever, there's going to be a lot of garbage that's produced, and that place is going to need to be cleaned from top to bottom. And it takes my cleaners about 6 hours to do it. So when I have 2 or 3 cleaners there for 6 hours, switching out all of the bedding on 19 beds, doing all of that laundry, folding all of that laundry, sweeping and mopping and vacuuming all of the floors, going through and making sure that all of the dishes are nice and clean, reorganizing all of the toys and the games, cleaning up the yard on half an acre, and putting back all of the gym equipment and everything else that needs to be organized in the garage. It is a big project that needs to be done over and over again, once or twice every week. So not only is it a big project, but think about all of the supplies that it takes to clean that property from top to bottom 1 or 2 times a week, and replacing all of the liners and all of the trash bins, and making sure all of the shampoo and conditioner bottles are filled, and everything else that goes into taking care of a large property that can host 25 people. So stop whining about the cleaning fees. In fact, even though my cleaning fee is $350, there are times where the cost to clean it and replace everything costs more than the $350. So I have to take out money from my earnings in order to help subsidize the cleaning fee. So basically, when you do the math, I charge about $25 to $30 to clean each room, which is the same that hotels charge. But the way that they do it is this. It costs a hotel about $20 to have somebody come in and clean your room, including the time they're there and switching out the bedding and everything that needs to be done to that room. But you don't see that as part of your bill because they don't charge you directly for the cleaning fee. What they will do is they will charge you through other hotel amenities. For example, have you ever opened that little fridge in your hotel room and found out that they have waters and drinks and other things like that? Well, how much are those products there? Are they cheap? No, they're super expensive. You can get a bottled water for like $3 or $4, and you can get a Coke for, $2 or $3. And then you have a little basket of snacks. All of those snacks cost 2 or 3 or 4 times what you could buy them in the store. And then there are also other services such as restaurants and other things like that, where the prices for meals are a lot higher than the other restaurants around. So even though they don't charge you directly for a cleaning fee, the average person that comes to a hotel spends more than just the cost of the room. And that additional cost is not shown in your bill, but you still pay it.
I don't want to act like an expert on real estate or on this topic, but anyway, moving on from the insane cleaning fees, this next issue is probably more of an issue with state laws on tenants versus landlords, but Airbnb is still a contributing factor, and I'm angry at them, so I'm going to continue being angry at them because they are not doing anything to help. But we are seeing a trend of more and more people renting a house on Airbnb or other platforms, and then the tenants just refuse to pay rent, they refuse to leave, and somehow they're just getting away from it. Here's one headline: I want my house back. Washington homeowner lives in a van while a deadbeat tenant lists house on Airbnb. This tenant not only kicked out the homeowner, making him homeless, but now he's listing that home on Airbnb as his own. And it's all just allowed. Like, how does any of this add up? Even if the major problem is with the states allowing this, California and Oregon and Washington, Airbnb is not doing anything to help. They know that this is not the owner of the house. I'm like, sure, list it on the platform. Give us that, $52 Airbnb fee per night. Sounds great. Kick the person off of the platform. He is illegally renting this house. I don't want to act like an expert on real estate or on this topic.
Okay, so now we come to Bret's second point, that Airbnb is not doing enough for hosts when guests are out of hand. And she talks about some things that have been in the news lately where people move into these properties and then they start to squat and they just stay there and stay there and stay there for, it seems like, ever. Now you have somebody who owns this Airbnb, and the person that they let in has just decided to make residence there and just stay there without paying. And the host probably has other guests that are planning on coming there, and it just becomes this big issue. Well, the truth is that happens in states where they have more tenant-friendly laws than they have landlord-friendly laws. And so if you live in one of those states, I'm sorry, I don't know really how to help you with that specific thing. But I do have a few ideas. Let's say somebody were to move into your property and they just decided that they were going to stay in this nicely furnished property that you have on Airbnb. Well, if that were to happen and you were to go the legal route and you're not able to get them removed from the property, then you may be able to get your stuff removed from the property. Now, of course, check with your local laws and you may want to get legal counsel, but one of the options might be to go into the property and then remove your beds, remove everything that you can from the property, all furniture, TVs, everything, because that is your stuff and they're using your stuff. And so you can go in there and remove all of your things because you either need to sell it or you're thinking about moving. And then you just make it very difficult for anybody to bring in any other furniture into the property. So once you make it less desirable to have somebody there, they may just think about doing this to some other person rather than you. So that is something that you may consider doing. But you know what? Even better, Bret cited an article where the squatter in the home listed the property as an Airbnb. That's fantastic. Am I the only one who sees how easy this would be to get back the property? What you would do is you would just book your own property. And then you go into your property and you move back in. And now you're back into your own property. What rights would they have then if they're not in the property and you are in the property? Would they call the police? What would the police say? Would they tell the police that the rightful owner has moved back into his property and that wasn't part of my plan? That situation seems like a pretty easy one to fix.
Now, to top it all off, if the absurd fees weren't enough and the squatters were not enough, there's also very, very good speculation that the popularity of people buying houses for the purpose of using them for Airbnbs, only for Airbnb to now become a dud, may have serious implications on our already ruined housing market. Just crazy. Here's another one. This author went on and tweeted under this one and said, number one, what's scary for the U.S. housing market is just how many Airbnbs there are. Data from All the Rooms shows 1 million Airbnb/VRBO rentals compared to only 570,000 homes for sale. It creates a huge home price downside if struggling Airbnbs elect to sell, which everybody is thinking in the next 2 years might happen because they cannot afford to be paying mortgages at our interest rates when Airbnbs are not even filled. I don't want to act like an expert on real estate or on this topic, but logically, this all makes sense. I don't want to act like an expert on real estate or on this topic, but logically, this all makes sense. I don't want to act like an expert on real estate or on this topic, but logically,
So no, Bret, you are not an expert in real estate. But the problem is you have a big platform and you have a big opinion. And so when people have a big platform and a big opinion, sometimes they can do things and say things and mislead people even when they're not trying to. For example, that statistic that you read, that there are 1 million Airbnbs and VRBOs out there, and there are only 570,000 properties on the market right now, that statistic is very misleading. The reason being is that there are 1 million Airbnbs and VRBOs, not just in this country, but throughout the world. In our country, there's a lot fewer than that. And the other thing you mentioned is that people can't afford the interest rate right now. And so with the decrease in bookings, people are going to be putting a ton of their properties up on the market because they can't afford the property with the interest rates the way that they are right now. This might be one of the places where you're showing a lack of expertise, because a lot of people that have their properties on VRBO and Airbnb, they bought these properties a while ago before interest rates went up. And then between the years of 2000 and 2002, they refinanced a lot of these properties for a lower interest rate. So a lot of these properties have a really low interest rate in the 3 to 5% range. For example, the short-term rental that I have up in Lakeside, I think that interest rate is in the 4s. So even when Airbnb may come down in bookings, I still have a low interest rate. Because my interest rate is so low, my overall mortgage payment is pretty low. So I'm able to weather this storm of lower bookings. But not only that, I've hired some really good coaches because for me, it's important to know what I'm talking about. So it's important for me to have the correct information. So I have hired good coaches to teach me how to improve my Airbnb listings. Here's a clip from one of my coaches and mentors, Sean Rakitic, who debunks the theory that Airbnb is negatively affecting the housing market right now.
He's also misrepresenting the amount of people that are picking up properties. There are 143 million housing units in the United States. There are 660,000 Airbnb properties active on the United States, right? That's less than 0.5% of the inventory. There are 50 million landlord units out of the 143. Like almost half of the properties are owned by landlords, but 30 plus million of those are owned by companies like BlackRock like REITs and stuff like that. The major problem with the housing crisis isn't even that, though. Even though you have 50 million people owning rental properties out of the 143 million available, what's made home prices so expensive is when COVID hit, we printed trillions of dollars of cash. Now, what happens if every time, like what happens at the end of that when you print money, at the end of it, every dollar is worth 50 cents because we doubled the amount of cash in supply without creating new value. Anything that had a fixed asset price like a home should double in value. So since 2020, home prices have gone up like 120 something percent. And that's because of our cash printing policy. That has nothing to do with Airbnb. Very little to do also relatively compared to the inflation of cash printing. The people owning these properties have less to do with it than governmental inflation in the Fed. But so if the big bad wolf is the Fed and then the little wolf is the landlord, he's trying to make Airbnb, which is like the flea on the baby wolf's back, make it look like the big bad wolf. He's misrepresenting the data on this.
No wonder we have no inventory. No wonder when you go on Zillow, there are barely any houses for sale, and they're all extremely expensive with an 8% interest rate. Now that people are not renting these houses as these owners expected because there's an oversaturation and the platform sucks now, these houses are going to be dumped back in the market if something does not change. And I think the only solution is what is happening right now. It has to crash. It has to collapse.
So now you're kind of going back and forth, Bret. You're saying that they're going to dump a ton of these properties back on the market. And by so doing, once you have an oversupply, usually that's going to bring down the cost. And you're talking about how the housing market is already ruined because nobody can afford a house right now because the prices are so high and the interest rate is so high. But if they were to dump a ton of houses, then what that would do is it would increase supply and thus bring down the cost of the house. And you say that the interest rate is high because you're young. And because you're young, you're used to these low interest rates that you've seen over the last maybe 6 years. However, historically, the average rate for a mortgage is around 7%. So right now we're just a little bit above that. But there have been times where the interest rate was like at 15% or 18%. And people are thinking, how in the world can I afford a home? Well, back then the homes were like $50,000 to $100,000. And if they had bought the home back then with the interest rates being so high, that same home would probably be worth 10 to 20 times more than how much they would have bought it for 20 or 30 years ago. So you're complaining about housing prices being so high, and you're complaining about the interest rate being so high, and you're complaining about them dumping a ton of properties in the market because there's this huge Airbnb bust. Well, I am going to agree that I have seen people putting their properties on the market, but it isn't because they have to put them on the market, because a lot of these properties that they bought a few years ago have increased in value, just like Sean talked about. So if you bought a property back in 2020 for $400,000 and that property is worth $600,000 today, and you're not getting as many bookings as you used to, you may be tempted to just say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and sell the property, take my gain of $100,000, $150,000, $200,000, and I'm just going to move on. And that is how the real estate game is played. But be careful to not say that the market is being ruined because of Airbnb, because it's not. At certain times, there are different investment strategies with real estate that work really well, and sometimes there are investment strategies that don't work so well. But it isn't that everything's being ruined, it's just going through its regular cycle.
I do like the idea of them cracking down on huge investors that are subsidized by the government in the first place and are taking advantage of this opportunity, which then hurts normal people who are just trying to rent an apartment long-term or buy a house for their family. All of these rentals, all of these Airbnbs, and the lack of for-sale inventory in the market right now.
Markets go up, markets go down. One thing I have to correct you on real quick is you say that no wonder there's not very many houses in the market right now, implying that it may be Airbnb's fault somehow, mostly just because you don't like them and you're upset with them. But the amount of houses on the market is not related to that. It's directly related to the fact that there's a huge majority of people that refinanced their homes over the last 2 to 3 years at a very low interest rate, at rates of even below 3%. If they go and buy the home next door that's worth the same amount as their home, then their payment right now would probably be double because interest rates are so high right now. And why are interest rates high? Let me guess, you're going to blame it on Airbnb, right? No. Interest rates are not high because of Airbnb. Interest rates are high because the Fed increased rates in order to slow growth and in order to kind of put us in a recession, which, congratulations, you did it. So now people have slowed their investing, they've slowed down in economic production because we're in a recession. So if you have an interest rate below 5%, you're just sitting, taking it easy. Even if you want to move, you're like, you know what, right now it's better that I just stay here right now. And that's what's affecting the low inventory on the market.
Just really reminds me of you will own nothing and you will be happy. Shout out to the elites and the World Economic Forum for ushering all of this in.
I do appreciate the shout out. And so the majority of landlords are not elites. They are regular, everyday people. They're not like these huge REITs that have a ton of properties that own thousands upon thousands of properties. The majority of landlords may have 1, 2, 3, 4 rentals. And the rentals that they have are really their retirement that they're working towards, that they're going to sell once they are 50, 60, 70 years old in order to help subsidize their retirement accounts. So your assumption of this is, again, a little off. Again, Bret, I really like your videos. A lot of times I really like your opinions. I just felt like I had to correct you a little bit because this is kind of my playground and I just wanted to make sure that we put out correct information. Have a great day and keep producing awesome videos.